All right, everybody. So we're going to be talking today about our reflective objects, and what we want to do is a couple of things. We want to focus on cleaning up the highlights as best we can, and then also making a selection and being able to move this onto a different background. So we're going to kind of play around with what that might look like and give us some options. So let's just go ahead and jump inside of Photoshop and take a quick look. Now, once I'm inside, sorry, Photopea. So once we're inside of here, first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to duplicate the background, because one of the things is I want to always preserve this so that in case I need to go back or blend to it, that there's the original information there. So there's a couple ways you can do that. You could right click on it and there's an option to duplicate layer. Um, I could also drag it down to the new layer icon. Command J would also duplicate it. So there's lots of ways we could go layer select, and copy and paste. There's lots of things we could do to create a new layer. Command J is my favorite, but now we've got this duplicate, so we can start to do some work on some of those areas. And let's just kind of zoom in here really quick and just maybe look at some of our issue areas. Now, I grabbed one just quickly, and my reflective object, it's a little bit older. It's a cappuccino sort of maker. It's been around, it's been on the fire and the flame, it's burned at the bottom and other sorts of things. So it's not going to be perfect. There's some water spots and things like that on here as well. We've added the silver, so we've got a little bit of a break between these two as well. So there's lots of little things that we might want to do to kind of clean that up, and create those highlights to be a little bit more seamless. So a couple of things that we could do to start with. Let's see here. Let me just zoom out just a little bit. All right, so maybe we should start with just defining our highlight, right? So what I'd like is a nice clean highlight that comes right along here. And so what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to use the lasso tool, but the polygonal lasso tool. And like we were talking a little bit about today, sometimes it's nice to have a little bit of a softness to it. Like if we zoom in there, there's a little bit of a soft edge to that. Like it's not just one sharp pixel along there. So I'm going to go ahead and let's just do, even if it's a one feather pixel, it just gives it a little bit of softness to that so that it's not going to be quite so sharp in the definition. And so let's just zoom in a little bit, and then I'm going to go ahead and kind of trace the line that's here already. Okay, so now right down here is where we kind of lose the edge of where that reflection is, right? But I would like that reflection to continue all the way down, right? So I'm going to go ahead and, I'm not trying to follow it exactly, but go ahead and bring that kind of straight down, to here. And then maybe it kind of curves just a little bit towards that inside part. And then let's kind of just bring it along this bottom edge as well, right? Because there's this little separation between the two. Then the other thing is, like, there's also like this little selection along here, right? There's actually a little bit of like a highlight over to this side. So I'm going to stay just a little bit to the outside of that highlight, so that we can still maintain that that little kind of edge light to it. The nice thing about having a little bit of a feather to it is if we're not perfect in our selection, it'll give us a little bit of wiggle room to kind of clean up those edges. All right, so we've completed our selection. So we now have this whole area of this left-hand reflection selected. So there's lots of different things that we could kind of do with that selection, right? So I'm going to, just to play around, just so we can kind of see some options, I'm going to take a new layer just above it. Now we still have our selections, so we could do things like we could fill it, right? But I wouldn't want to fill it with just white, right? That's going to look really bad. So I might want to come in and maybe click here and using the eyedropper, maybe pick out like one of these kind of highlighty grays, right? And I could say, okay. And then I could go edit and fill. Let's see, where is the edit? Oh, not in Chrome, up here, edit, and fill. Okay. All right, now I'm gonna go ahead and zoom out. So when I do that though, right, it's solid, and then it loses all textures and details. So that may be clean, but it loses all sense of like reality, right? So probably not the best solution. And now I could take that and I could go and say, well, I'm going to take my opacity and I'm maybe bring it down a little bit and just kind of clean it up a little bit or something like that. Something like that may work. There's lots of things that we could kind of do, but just kind of exploring some ideas here. So instead of doing it that way, right, we're not going to just fill it with a solid color. I'm going to go back a couple of steps. Well, let's say I can just actually delete what's inside there. Let's go inside there. All right. So the other thing we may want to do is actually, well, for sure right here, we need to get rid of this like dark area, right? So I'm on this new layer. So I'm going to start with my stamp tool. And I'm going to just do a little bit of cloning and bring some of that on down. So I'm going to just try to follow these lines a little bit. Again, we have to use the Option key and tell it where we're going to take it from. So I'm going to go Option, click there. I'm going to try to follow that line down. Let's just zoom in a little bit so we can see. Oops. There we go. All right, so again, I'm going to use the Option key. I'm going to follow this line right here, and I'm going to bring that down here. Gosh, I wish it would not go disappearing. Current, let's go current and below. Okay, that'll be easier. Option. Okay, there we go. Now I can actually see. So then we're just going to try to keep that line and just kind of fill in some of these spots over here. Now, the way that we're going to be doing this, it doesn't have to be exactly perfect, right? I think I've been saying that a lot lately, because we're going to actually like take this and we're going to kind of blend it a little bit. We're going to do like a blur to it, so that might help clean up some of those like imperfect water spots and things. So as I'm cloning here, I'm not going to worry too much that it's not like a perfect cloning job. Even if I'm not going to be perfectly painterly, if that's even a word, right? So it's just going to fill in these other little parts here. All right. So again, that at least unifies that part, right? It's not that it's necessarily a perfect clean selection over here. I mean, like texture inside of here, but at least now it continues all the way down through here. So then again, that's on this layer here, right? So at least we've got that part cleaned up. And what I'm going to do, let's see. Well, I guess maybe we need to fill in that whole part. All right, so now we've got that highlight. And so what we're going to go ahead and do is we don't want it to be so kind of blotchy. So what we're going to go ahead and do is we're going to use a filter, and we're going to go blur, and we're going to do Gaussian blur. And with the Gaussian blur, we're going to go ahead and just bring up this radius a little bit. We want to maintain some of that like texture, but we want kind of to clean up that highlight a little bit. We just kind of play with, how blurry do we want that to become, right? And notice it starts to kind of creep in just a little bit, as it starts to blur out too much. So we can just go, a little bit of a blur. And then let's go ahead and say, okay. And so because it did creep in just a little bit, we can still, even on that blur layer, now we can do Option and borrow some from over here. And then we can, with that cleaned up edge, bring that, over into here. And then same from over here. So just to see, that's where we started. That's where we're at now, right? So already it's starting to look a little bit better. It's giving us a little bit more form around there. Cleaning up that edge, along this side here. And we still have that highlight on that side. So then what we're going to do is we're going to do the same thing kind of over on this side. All right, so now we've got our new selection, and what I want to do is to fix a few of the things we had last time. I think it'll be better for us to actually duplicate everything that's on there so that we have a clean layer, so we don't have to try to fill in every little hole. We'll already have some of those original pixels on our new layer. So what we're going to do is we're going to do Command and J, but that's going to create a new layer, but only with the selected area. So when we do that, notice over here in layer 1, it already has a complete selection of the area that we just selected a second ago. So I think that'll be a little bit easier for us to kind of deal with. And then now we've lost our selection, but if I hold down the Command key, so if I hold down Command and I click on the actual thumbnail of the layer, it'll give me back my selection. So that way when I go to do my cloning and things to clean it up, it's still going to stay within that area. But I don't have to worry about getting every little single pixel because it's already going to be matching. It already has the pixels there. So then we're just going to start to paint, kind of clean up some of these edges. Just extending that shadow all the way down. So that way, we've got one solid highlight as opposed to it being, two, cutting off at that bottom part. And notice these two values aren't the same, and that's okay because the light's coming in from that right side or the left side, and the right side is just getting a little bit less light. So again, now that we've got that layer selected, we're going to go ahead and take this layer, we're going to go filter, I'm going to go ahead and do Command D to deselect because I don't want it to cut inside. Oops, get off there. All right, so now we're on that layer, so we're going to go Filter, Blur, and then Gaussian Blur. And we can play with our radius a little bit until we start to get it to a place that we like. Okay. All right, so now we've cleaned up both of those sides, this side and that side. And then, we're just going to do the same thing to these two edges over here as well. All right, so now we've got one selection for this whole middle section. And again, now that I've got my selection, I'm going to do Command J. That gives me just that middle section. And we'll kind of do it in two parts. We're just going to bring this part down here and that part down there. And then we'll kind of clean up a little bit of what's happening on this inside middle part and just make kind of more of a solid black line. So let's go ahead and grab our cloning tool. Again, we're going to grab this option. We're going to bring some of this kind of just straight down. Let's forgot to bring our selection back. There we go. That way we don't go over into those areas. So again, option. Just make sure to follow this back. All right, so that looks a little bit better. And again, let's just do our same method on this layer 2. Let's go ahead and just do filter. We can just do last filter so it does the same amount of blur. So just moves that out just a little bit. It looks like it creeped in a little bit over here, so we're just going to go ahead and take some of this black edge over here and just going to fill that back in with some of our edge. Then, now that we've got all of those, so let's go ahead and create a group. So I'm going to go ahead and let's select all 3 of those and let's make a group. So group is the little folder down here at the bottom. And let's just call this highlights. All right, so now that we've got all of these together in a group, let's go ahead and deselect. And we might want to do some work just with like kind of overall contrast and things. So let's just use an adjustment layer. Let's try just doing brightness and contrast to start with. I'd like it just to be maybe just a little bit brighter overall and maybe with a little bit more contrast. Okay, that's looking a little bit better. There we go. Okay, and then again, let's take a look. Let's see where we started. And that's where we're at now, right? So we definitely have cleaned up those lines, right? Had I had a clean bottle, we would have much nicer highlights inside of here. So let's just say we're happy with that. So then the next thing I want to do is we're just going to put it on a pure white background, right? So let's just go ahead and we're going to let's just make a cutout for this. So what I'm going to do is I want to put all of these adjustments that we just made, and our background into one picture. So, all right, so now we've got kind of the general way that our shiny object's gonna look. And so I want to start being able to do some other things to work with the actual background. And so what I want to do is take all the things that we've done together and put them into one layer. And so the way that we're going to do that is we're going to hold down the Shift key and we're going to do Option and Command. So if you're on the PC, it'll be Alt and Control. And then we're going to hit the letter E as an elephant or everything. And when we do that, if I turn off all these other layers, I've got an exact copy of all those things put together. So it's been kind of flattened and merged into a new layer up at the top. And the nice thing about that is that now we can start to do some selections and things, and it's not going to be doing just bits and pieces of it. And now we've got a pretty white, value inside of here. So what we should be able to do is actually make a pretty decent selection using those white areas. So let's take a look here and see what options we've got. So let's go ahead and let's just do quick selection. Well, actually, you know what? Magic Wand will work great for this. So let's just click here. Now, when we have the Magic Wand, what we're going to do is we're going to choose an area that we want. So right now the tolerance is set to 16, usually 32 is kind of the default, but let's just see what happens. So if we click there, it's done a really great job of selecting all the way around these edges here, right? So we've got good eye, good there, good there, good there. Now in here, it starts getting a little bit less white, right? So then what ends up happening is we're gonna just use the Shift key and we're gonna add a few other values that are similar to that. Now, we do probably want a little part of this drop shadow, but let's just kind of keep cheating this in here a little bit, and kind of bring it in a little bit tighter around this bottom edge. Okay, now that's done a pretty good job all the way around through there, but now there's also this part over here. Now, I'm not going to try to use the Magic Wand for that part, right? That's not going to do a great job of it. It's going to pick values that are over in these areas. So what we're going to do instead is I can switch, right? I already have a selection, so I can come over to my polygonal lasso tool and I can add to the selection, right? So this is selected, so I want to add. So I'm going to do Shift and I want to add this whole section over here. So once it's started, I can just click around. So we're just adding that section. And then let's also add this bottom section. We'll come in down below here. All right, so now all of that's been selected as well. Now, everything on the outside of our selection is what's actually selected. So let's go ahead and just go to Select. So in our menus up here, we're going to go Select, and we're going to inverse the selection. So now that the tea kettle is what's actually selected. And with that, it looks like it's picked a little bit in this area that we kind of lost a little bit. So that's a pretty easy edge to select. So what I'm going to do is probably just go ahead and zoom in just a little bit, because this is probably that hardest area for it because of the color contrast. So let's go ahead and we're just going to take this and we're going to go with the shift key. We want to add, since now this is what's not active and this is active. And we're going to go shift, and then we're just going to come straight down along this line here. Come across and create where that outside edge of this is, nice and clean. Looks like I did a good job once we got down in there. And then we'll come around. And now we get a nice clean line there. Let's just double check on the other sides that didn't miss anything. That all looks to be in pretty good shape. Okay, so now that we've got our selection, we're just going to copy and paste it. Okay, there we go. And so now when we look, you know, we've got our selection along with the drop shadow, and then we've got the ability to do anything we want, right? We can put it on a new background, we can put it into a scene, we can do whatever we want with it, right? Probably be a good idea at this point, if we haven't already, do a save. So let's go File, Save as PSD. Again, Photoshop file, that's going to allow us to be able to come back to this at a later time. Now, if I wanted this on a pure white background, I could just add a new layer. And with this layer 3, we can just fill it with white, right? So I can go edit and, oops, again, inside, edit and fill. Now, if I don't already have that as my foreground, there's also an option in here to go white or gray or anything else. So I can go white, okay. Now, that did it up here at the top. All we have to do is simply move it down, right? So now we've got our, you know, white background. And if I don't like the positioning, now that we've got a little more space, we can move that around. Looks like our drop shadow edge is a little bit rough here. We might want to go in and smooth that out. So let's let me just make sure we're seeing all the pixels okay. So now that we've got it, now that we've got that extra space, let's go ahead and reposition this. So let's go ahead and grab our move tool and let's bring this down just maybe a little bit where it makes a little more sense. Okay. Now, if we don't want to have just a pure white background, because there might be a time that we need that, we might want to do something more like, you know, maybe something with a little bit of drama or something, maybe give it a new, you know, fresh color or something like that. We might try playing around with gradients. So gradients are down here on the left-hand side. It's about halfway down. And there's several types of gradients, right? There's linear gradients, radial gradients, angle, reflected, and diamond. So we can play around with a couple of these. Radial is going to be a circle, right? So we need to set our foreground and background color. So I'm going to leave white as my beginning color, and then I'm going to have it fade to like a light blue or something like that. So let's just, you know, and it can be kind of subtle. It'll just be kind of light and happy, you know. And so what we're going to do is you just start, you know, wherever you want. So I'm going to start maybe just a little bit behind here, and I'm going to drag. Now, if I do a short drag, it's going to, that's where it's going to end and be 100% blue, right? So it's going to make it's kind of a tight circle. If I pull it out further and extend it past, then it's going to then, you know, be more white and fade out towards the outside. So I can even extend it further, you know, and so on. So you kind of can pull around there and, you know, and create these different shapes. Maybe I'll decide this needs to go a little bit lighter, you know, say okay. And then that way when we pull out, we have a little more of a white inside of there. So, you know, that's kind of one way we can create a background. Let's see what the reflected one looks like. So let's go ahead and pull, you know. So that's, you know, creating like a band where it's blue and then white in the middle. Oops, that was a really short one, right? So there's our line. You know, so we can do lots of different things. You could stack them up, you could do them in different ways, but, you know, it gives it a little more interest inside of that background. You know, we could also attempt to create like a reflection to things. So let's make this blue, maybe just a little bit bluer. Let's try this, okay. And again, we're going to go with that reflected one. So we'll have a little bit of a band of light that kind of goes through there. And then again, let's put these two together. So let's go ahead and do again Shift Option Command E, and then let's take that layer and let's go ahead and we're gonna flip it this way. So we're gonna take it and we're gonna go Image and Transform and Flip vertically. Okay, so now it's upside down. And then what we can do is just take this and bring this down here. And let's see if we can get it down low enough. And so we kind of have to figure out, well, where is our horizon line, right? So like our the two, reflection would come forward. So we needed to kind of line up, around there. And then we could take it and start to drop the opacity because we obviously our reflection wouldn't be 100%. We would just want a little bit of a reflection. And then the areas where we don't want it to show up, we could then just mask. So we could like take this and go ahead and mask it. And then we're going to use our brush and we're going to hit D on the keyboard. That'll give us the default colors and we want to hide. So we're going to hit X and that'll switch them. And let's make our brush a little bit bigger. So, I do want the kind of reflected line maybe kind of through here, but maybe just not through these areas here. So we're going to make this part solid, right? If I make a mistake, I could just come back with X. Which then kind of creates the effect that maybe there was like, a horizon line or something like that, or maybe it's on a glass surface and it's falling forward or whatever. So you can kind of play around. There's lots of things that we can do. The idea is that we want to be able to clean up those reflective objects. And again, the cleaner you start with, the better it's going to go. And then we want to be able to kind of play with how we can smooth those out a little bit, and then also how we can put it onto a new background or even create a new background or put it into a different scene. If you want to start with like, grab like a kitchen or something like that and put it into the kitchen or something like that, then by all means go ahead and play around with it. But that's the basic idea how we can take that and start to clean up our reflective object.